It would seem that Senegalese President Faye Diomaye has decided to take a page out of Traore's books and distance Senegal from France. You see, since he became president, Faye has been in the middle, wanting to change Senegal's relationship with France, but refusing to end diplomatic relations with France. If you recall, in 2024, he paid a visit to France to discuss deepening relations between Senegal and France. However, it seems the Senegalese president has finally made a decision not to remain on the fence any longer. In recent times, he has made certain decisions that signal an end to the budding Senegalese and France relationship. But what exactly did he do? Let's find out. A few weeks ago, Faye's administration made a striking decision. His government has decided to rename streets and public squares to honor Senegalese. This might not sound like a groundbreaking decision, but the fact is that this decision has deeper implications than simply renaming streets. You see, African countries were colonized for more than a century by the West. Throughout these years, the West destroyed and demonized African culture, eradicated African ideologies and principles, pillaged African resources, and left a system that divided the African people and ensured they remained dependent on the West. Now, after the colonial era ended and independence was granted to African countries, the West did not just leave, they left behind remnants of colonialism. These remnants paid tribute and honor to the period where Africans were considered next to nothing by the whites. Walking through the streets and exploring African countries, the evidence of colonialism can still be seen even decades after it ended. In Francophone countries like Senegal, for instance, there are many streets named by the French colonial government to honor officials and royals of the French Empire. Besides this, the French language and the French currency are also remnants of French colonialism. In Senegal, 65 years after its independence, the capital's political and administrative center is still dominated by colonial-era names, indicating a lasting imprint of 300 years of conquest, slavery, and colonial rule. In 2019, a study was conducted which revealed that 60% of the area in Senegal bears the names of colonial administrators, governors, commanders, as well as French writers and doctors. From markets and streets to prominent buildings, these colonial-era names serve as reminders of past struggles, particularly under the past junta-led administrations. But these locations carry painful memories for the Senegalese people. This is why many of them have long demanded the removal of all traces of French colonialism from the country. Take the Boulevard du Général de Gaulle in Dakar, for instance. This major highway road was named after former French President de Gaulle, a man who established what we now know as Françafrique. Under his rule, he ensured that France continued to maintain influence and control over former French colonies in Africa. He was the one who wrote the colonial pact and made sure that African countries signed the pact before granting them independence. Before we proceed, here is a reminder to like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe to our channel so that you can get more videos like this. As you know, the colonial pact gave France exclusive access to African countries' resources, took charge of the militaries in the country, ensured French companies were the first to have access to minerals, and ensured that African countries kept almost 90% of their reserves in the French bank. This was the man whom this street was named after. Imagine that. Senegalese citizens like Matar Seck, a meat seller, have repeatedly questioned the point of having an Avenue Faidherbe, named after a brutal colonial governor, or a Rue de Jules Ferry, after a French politician who once claimed colonialism was necessary. He said, "I've lived in Europe. I've been to Barcelona, Rome, and Milan, but I've never seen white people give the names of their most prestigious historical monuments and buildings to a Senegalese." Seck also added that we have no shortage of people to name our most important streets after. I want to see Youssou N'Dour Street, for example. Thankfully, the Senegalese government has decided to heed the demands of the Senegalese people. In December 2024, Faye announced that his government intends to rename streets and public squares to honor Senegalese. He assigned his Prime Minister, Ousmane Sonko, the responsibility of establishing a National Council for Memory and the management of historical heritage. In a few months' time, Senegal's streets would have a new look, no longer bearing the name of colonial oppressors. Beyond renaming streets, the agency will also rewrite Senegal's textbooks to reflect a national perspective. Yes, you heard right. In most African countries, history books have been written from the perspective of the West, hailing them as heroes and civilized while demonizing African culture and identity. But that's not even the worst part. Currently, history books that showcase African culture have been eradicated from the basic school curriculum. This is a wrong and sad move because young Africans no longer have any idea about where they come from and Africa's rich history and identity. However, in Senegal, the government has decided to do something different by rewriting history books in Senegal. According to Dakar-based urban planner Rakiat Diallo Fall, these efforts are essential to eliminating the lingering impact of the past, from Senegal's role as a major slave port to its centuries of colonial rule. Seeing streets named after people we don't know, people who have mistreated us, is a disgrace, Diallo said. Renee Lake, a political analyst and director of Cineplus.com, a US-based media group, has also said that the move is long overdue. Indeed, this move is long overdue and signals the government's decision to create its own path independent of that of France. Interestingly, Senegal is not just renaming its streets. The government has also announced that Senegal would no longer maintain a French military base. This was announced in November 2024 by President Faye in preparation for the 80th anniversary of a notorious colonial-era massacre. Interestingly, on the same day, French President Emmanuel Macron acknowledged for the first time that the French army was responsible for the massacre of Senegalese soldiers in 1944. President Macron made this known in a letter addressed to the Senegalese authorities. There is no doubt that the only reason France is acknowledging this as a massacre is because France is losing influence in Africa. But what exactly happened in 1944? Well, the Traore massacre, as it is called, took place on December 1, 1944, when between 35 and 400 West African soldiers, who fought alongside the French army during World War II, were shot dead by French troops. After fighting the war, these soldiers who had done their job were sent back home to the Traore military camp in Dakar, Senegal. But they were sent back without any financial pay which they deserved and under poor conditions. These made the soldiers angry and eventually led to a mutiny in the camp. The French brigadier general at the time decided to make a show of force to bring it back under his authority. There is no complete account of exactly how it happened, but on December 1, 1944, a shootout occurred in the camp which led to the death of several of the soldiers and wounded many more. The official report of December 2 states that 24 of the mutineers were killed outright and 45 were wounded, 11 of which subsequently died of their wounds. However, according to an article published in November 2023, some veterans later claimed that the death toll actually reached as high as 300 dead. In 1945, 34 of the mutineers, who were thought to be the instigators of the insurrection, were tried and given sentences ranging from 1 to 10 years of prison. But that's not all. The widows of the soldiers who had died were never awarded any veteran pensions. The worst part is that there was no investigation in the matter, and the French authorities claimed that the soldiers were troublesome and prone to revolt. In addition to this, France did everything to cover the incident, which is why the Traore massacre is not so popular outside Senegal. It was never taught in schools in France, and a Senegalese film about the massacre released in 1988, Camp de Traore, was both banned in France and censored in Senegal. Now, according to Faye, Macron's recognition of the massacre is a good thing, but maintaining French military bases in Senegal undermines the country's sovereignty. He said, "Historically, France enslaved, colonized, and stayed here. Obviously, I think that when you reverse the roles a little, you will have a hard time conceiving that another army, China, Russia, Senegal, or any other country could have a military base in France." Speaking during an interview at the presidential palace, Faye stated that Senegal is an independent country. It is a sovereign country, and sovereignty does not accept the presence of military bases in a sovereign country. However, Faye added that this does not mean that he plans to sever ties with France like Burkina Faso and Niger did. He said, "Today, China is our largest trading partner in terms of investment and trade. Does China have a military presence in Senegal? No. Does that mean our relations are cut? No." Historically, Senegal has kept about 350 soldiers in the country. But now, the Senegalese government has indicated that it no longer wants French troops in its base. As of February 2025, plans have been made to ensure the withdrawal of French troops from Senegal by the end of 2025. In a joint statement released by France and Senegal, both countries stated that they are establishing a joint commission that would oversee the departure of French elements from the country and a restitution of military bases by year's end. The foreign ministries of both countries said they intend to work on a new defense and security partnership that would take into account the strategic priorities of all parties. Senegal's decision to systematically distance itself from France follows a similar trend started by the military leaders of the Sahel region. Like Senegal, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso have also kicked out French troops and embarked on a journey of removing remnants of colonialism. For instance, Mali recently removed French as the official language of the country. In Burkina Faso, a major street in the capital city of Ouagadougou, which was named after the French colonial-era leader Charles de Gaulle, has been replaced with that of Thomas Sankara, a Pan-Africanist, hero of Burkina Faso, and beloved former president. The street was formerly called Boulevard Charles de Gaulle, but has now been changed to Boulevard Thomas Sankara. The formal renaming of Boulevard Charles de Gaulle to Boulevard Thomas Sankara took place at a ceremony on Sunday, commemorating the 36th anniversary of Sankara's assassination. The military junta of the country, Ibrahim Traore, was present at the anniversary, and he was the one who laid the foundation stone for a Thomas Sankara mausoleum. He was also the one who renamed the street after Sankara, Burkina Faso's hero. Speaking at the anniversary after laying the foundation stone for Thomas Sankara's mausoleum, Traore described Sankara as a man of vision whose legacy continues to inspire the African people. He said, "I pay tribute to a man of vision, an inexhaustible source who nourishes the inspiration of the African people, particularly those of Burkina Faso, in search of total sovereignty." The president also added that Thomas Sankara is a name that drapes this boulevard with the seal of dignity and sovereignty of our people, in keeping with our history, our spirit, and our soul marked by anti-imperialist convictions. It was a beautiful ceremony that not only paid tribute to the national hero, but also a way to decolonize the streets in Burkina Faso. The vice president of the International Thomas Sankara Memorial Committee, retired Colonel Major Daouda Traore, commended Burkina Faso's military rulers for this iconic move. Interestingly, Traore has also taken a step beyond this. A few months ago, he announced that he is changing the country's national anthem, which was originally in English, to the Burkinabe local language. According to the Burkinabe Ministry of National Education, the Burkinabe national anthem has been translated into 14 local Burkinabe languages in order to strengthen patriotic sentiment and shift away from neo-colonial practices. This is remarkable. As we stated earlier, since the Sahel leaders came to power, they have strived to break the chains of colonialism that have held the African continent for so long. You see, when the colonial masters landed on African shores, the first step they took to colonize Africans was to somehow convince Africans that their traditions and languages were savages. Then, they began to impose and enforce their ideas and principles on the people. The only way they could successfully do this was by enforcing their language, be it French, Portugal, or English, on the local communities. So began the spread of Western education with the aid of Christian missionaries. They built schools and encouraged Africans to learn these new ideas, not because they were interested in developing the colonies, but because they wanted to impose their ideas and make Africans learn just enough to understand their principles and ideas. If you observe, the schools, even up till now, don't teach Africans what is truly needed to industrialize and develop. Africans were only taught theories and never the practical knowledge on how to do things. If they actually did, independence would have occurred before 1960, because it was only after World War II, when Africans were used to fight the war and they interacted with people from other countries, that was when the struggle for independence truly began. In these schools, Africans were taught and are still taught to hate their identity, language, customs, and traditions. They were taught that the white man's knowledge was supreme. This is why it was very easy to group local communities that had their own language, customs, and traditions together into a single country. While it was a good move for the colonial master, this can arguably be regarded as the origin of Africa's problem today. Think about it. Every African country in existence today has more than 10 local languages. Nigeria alone has 250 local languages, and each of these languages comes from different ethnic groups with their own beliefs, customs, and traditions. Before the colonial masters came, each of the ethnic groups was divided into kingdoms and everybody lived by their rules. Of course, there were skirmishes and fights between these kingdoms, but that is normal. However, when the colonial masters came, they decided to lump all these ethnic groups with their different languages and traditions to form a single country. Now, check the root cause of violence and insecurity in most African countries. It can be traced to tribal and ethnic concerns. In Mali, the violence started in 2013 because of the Traore rebels, a tribe in Mali that believes they are marginalized. Today, that violence has spread to other parts of the Sahel because Islamic jihadists took advantage of the situation. In Nigeria, the political scene is not stable because the minority groups feel that only two tribes, which are the Hausas and Yorubas, have been the ones leading the country since independence. This issue of ethnicity and language has created strife and division, making the goal of African unity a dream. If Africa is to get better and have any hope of development, Africa needs to go back to its roots. Africa needs to find its identity and language. Just look at the Asian countries and even Europe. All these countries have their own languages, which is the official language spoken in that country. In Germany, the official language is German. In China, it's Mandarin. In India, it's Hindu. Yep, interesting thing, all these countries have different languages as well, just like Africa, but they have a general language that everyone speaks. It seems that it's only in the African continent that the official languages are languages imposed by the colonial masters. In African schools, it's considered wrong and a crime to speak your local language. The situation is terrible and is even worse because some of the current generation of young people do not even know how to speak their local language. Everything they know is either English, French, or Portuguese. When will Africa learn? China was very poor before World War II, but after the World War, the leaders decided to take serious measures to develop their country. Guess what? They did it without losing their identity. In Africa, the situation is not the same. Africa needs to follow the steps of China and choose one official language. This is a very necessary step to break free from colonialism. India was colonized by the British, but they didn't lose their identity, language, traditions, and customs. Captain Ibrahim Traore understands this, and that is why he decided to translate the national anthem into 14 Burkinabe local languages, which will be taught in schools. However, Burkina Faso is not the only country making this move. In Ivory Coast, former French presidents Valéry Giscard d'Estaing and François Mitterrand are no longer honored by boulevards. Instead, they have been replaced by the first Ivorian president, Félix Houphouët-Boigny, and other local figures. Similarly, in Senegal last year, opposition leader Ousmane Sonko removed Charles de Gaulle's name from an avenue and renamed it Peace Street after becoming mayor of the Ziguinchor district. Other signs bearing the names of French colonial personalities were also replaced. In Tanzania, the renaming of streets in the city of Dar es Salaam has been undertaken to reflect the country's post-independence identity and honor Tanzanian leaders and historical figures. After gaining independence from British colonial rule in 1961, Tanzania embarked on a process of reclaiming its history and cultural heritage, including the renaming of streets that previously honored colonial figures. Streets that were originally named after British governors, colonial administrators, and other colonial-era figures underwent a transformation to highlight the contributions and achievements of Tanzanian leaders. The renaming aimed to celebrate the nation's own heroes and emphasize its independence and self-determination. This significant renaming in Burkina Faso and similar actions in other former French colonies reflect a growing sentiment to decolonize and assert national identity. It's a story of history being rewritten and symbols being redefined. Although Africa has not completely broken free from the chains of colonialism, with each anti-colonial action taken by African leaders, soon enough Africa will be completely free. What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments section below. Don't forget to like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe to our channel.